I never thought I'd be rifling through my dead grandfather's filing cabinet in his dim, cedar-scented study. But here I am, shaking like a leaf at 32F, in the middle of a small Midwestern town that smells like wet asphalt and pine after a summer storm. Grandpa had always been organized, maybe obsessively so. I remember the smell of his cigars, even in the drawer, mixed with that faint tang of old paper. It used to make me feel safe as a kid. Now it's just a reminder of how fragile family can be. I'd flown back to help sort his affairs after the funeral, still jet-lagged from the late flight, and I wasn't expecting to uncover a bomb. My cousin and I had already been through the usual. Awkward hugs, forced smiles. "Oh, honey, we'll all miss him." Kind of small talk. When my mother casually mentioned that Uncle Dan had been unusually helpful with the estate, that should have been my first red flag. I found it buried under a stack of tax documents, the will. At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. Uncle Dan had somehow maneuvered himself into taking the lion's share. My grandfather, God rest him, had been a careful man. He didn't make mistakes like this. My heart started pounding. My hands were clammy, fumbling over the papers as I tried to confirm the date, the signatures. Anything that could prove this was a forgery. Then I noticed something else. A small, folded piece of paper tucked into the corner of the filing cabinet. My grandfather's handwriting. "For when the smoke clears," it said, with a faint wax seal I'd never seen before. Inside were notes, off-the-record musings about what he wanted for the family. It mentioned me specifically, my education fund, something he'd promised me decades ago. And then a line that made my stomach turn. "Dan has his eyes on more than he deserves. Keep the truth close until the time is right." I sat back in the leather chair, the scent of cigar smoke still clinging to my hands, and felt the blood drain from my face. My first thought was disbelief. My second thought was fear of what my family would do if I tried to challenge this. My third, darkest thought was revenge. I don't do revenge lightly. I'm 32, a community college history adjunct, single, and broke enough that the idea of hiring a lawyer on a whim would have made me laugh a week ago. But right now, my brain was on fire with ideas. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice whispering in the wood-paneled room, "Make it right, make it clean." So I started planning. Not something violent, not something illegal, just precise. A puzzle of documents, emails, old recordings of conversations where Dan had hinted at this kind of manipulation, and a subtle web that would expose him without me getting my hands dirty. I leaned back, heart still hammering, and muttered under my breath, "Nobody cheats Grandpa and walks away unscathed." I didn't realize it then, but that moment, flipping that page, smelling the cigar, feeling the weight of betrayal, would mark the start of a months-long game that would take every ounce of patience and cunning I had. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally see Dan squirm in front of the whole family, powerless, with nothing but the truth staring him down. Took me a week just to get my bearings. Between teaching night classes at the community college and grading papers in my tiny, cramped apartment that smelled faintly of old coffee and dusty textbooks, I obsessed over the files I'd found. I replayed Grandpa's old messages in my head. Every conversation where Dan had bragged about handling the estate, like it was some game he'd already won. My anger simmered quietly, under a veneer of polite smiles at family gatherings. I started small. A casual question here, a text there. "Hey, do you remember Grandpa talking about his education fund?" I asked my cousin over coffee at a local diner, the smell of fried eggs and burnt toast filling the air. She hesitated, glanced at her phone like she was hiding something, then mumbled, "I don't think he really wanted to," before stopping herself. That tiny slip felt like a door opening. Then came the first concrete proof. I found an old voicemail on Grandpa's answering machine. Yes, the kind you almost never use anymore, where Dan was boasting about how nobody would ever check the signatures on the updated will. Hearing his voice, that smug, lazy laugh, made my stomach twist. The realization hit me like a punch. This wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. I started documenting everything. Emails, old text messages, financial statements, even photographs of Grandpa's original will. I made copies, backed them up, hid them in places Dan would never think to look. And slowly, meticulously, I pieced together a timeline showing exactly how he manipulated the estate. Each detail stoked my fire. The more I uncovered, the more I wanted him to feel the same panic I'd felt when I discovered the betrayal. The problem was how to confront him without looking like I'd lost my mind. He was slippery, always charming, the kind of man who could smile in court and make everyone doubt reality itself. That's when I remembered the old family reunion videos Grandpa had kept in the attic, hours of home movies, candid recordings of conversations, Dan boasting about family wealth, slipping in offhand comments about taking what's mine, while Grandpa wasn't paying attention. I spent nights scanning and time-stamping every clip, a digital skeleton key to Dan's deceit. I knew the moment had to be perfect. I imagined the living room at the next family gathering, the smell of Dan's aftershave mingling with Aunt May's pot roast, everyone clustered around the kitchen island, and me, holding the evidence in my hands, calm but ready. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, about showing that manipulation, no matter how cleverly disguised, has a way of coming to light. I rehearsed lines, imagining his smirk faltering when I casually said, "Funny, I found some old messages Grandpa left me. You might want to hear them." That one sentence could crack the facade he'd built over decades. But as the day approached, my stomach twisted with a mix of fear and exhilaration. What if I overplayed it? What if the family turned on me for exposing him, even though I knew I was right? I had to stay precise, measured, a surgeon, not a saboteur. I kept repeating Grandpa's words to myself in the quiet of my apartment. Make it right, make it clean. And somewhere deep down, I knew I was ready. Ready to watch the spider Dan had spun for years get caught in his own web. The thought made my pulse race. The night of the family gathering, I could feel it in my bones. This was it. The smell of Aunt May's pot roast hit me the moment I stepped inside, mingling with the faint tang of Dan's cologne, like he'd been ready for this confrontation all along, except he hadn't been ready for me. I kept the flash drive hidden in my pocket, my palm sweaty but my mind razor-sharp. Everyone was in the living room, the old leather couch sagging under the weight of decades of family dinners. Dan was perched at the armrest, grinning that smug, self-satisfied grin, and I could feel my teeth grit. I poured myself a glass of water, pretending to be casual, while my stomach churned with anticipation. "Hey, everyone," I said, my voice steady, louder than I thought I could manage. Heads turned. I found something in Grandpa's old recordings and papers. Thought you'd want to hear it." Dan raised an eyebrow. "Oh? What's that, little detective?" His smirk was infuriating. I walked over to the TV and plugged in the flash drive, feeling every eye on me. The first clip rolled. Dan, in Grandpa's office, casually talking about reworking the will, so I get more, while Grandpa's voice hummed faintly in the background. Unaware. The room went silent. What is this?" Dan stammered, his usual confidence cracking ever so slightly. I clicked to the next clip. A voicemail, timestamped just months before Grandpa passed, where Dan laughed about nobody checking the signatures. His face went pale. My cousin gasped. Aunt May clutched her pearls. I felt a strange thrill, cold, clean, precise. "I guess you thought nobody would ever know," I said, keeping my tone calm, almost conversational. "Funny. Grandpa made sure I did." Dan's smugness collapsed like a house of cards. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, scrambling for some charm, some excuse, but the clip spoke louder than anything he could say. I could see the heat of embarrassment spreading across his face. My entire body was buzzing, fear, adrenaline, and a sharp, satisfying anger all tangled together. The family watched in stunned silence, processing what I'd revealed. My cousin whispered, "I can't believe he did this." Aunt May nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. Dan finally muttered something about misunderstandings. But it was hollow, pitiful, and in that moment, I realized something Grandpa had known all along. The truth has a way of finding the light, no matter how carefully it's hidden. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I just let the evidence speak. And as Dan sat there, powerless, the irony hit me.